up, guys? Shreddo Taco here. So I mentioned last week that I wanted to go over some of my thoughts and experiences in trying to attain that shredded body that we've all kind of come to know as the trendy physique of the year. And I wanted to kind of go into some of my own experiences in terms of dealing with some of the pitfalls that come into play when going for that goal, as well as some serious mistakes I've made, and then finally circle back to some goals and things that I've learned that I really think are beneficial to the community as a whole. Really quick, guys, if you like content like this, please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a like and comment below any of your thoughts. Really helps out. So let's dive right into it, guys. My experience is very it's very different in terms of like just really anyone that I know in the bodybuilding community, in the sense where I grew up in a family that was very athletic, and me myself, I was not. I was very introverted. I gravitated towards things that were more of an artsy nature. I used to draw a lot. I even made clay figurines. That was like my favorite hobby. Instead of buying toys, like I was very introverted and very artsy. Also very nerdy. You look around me, I've always been like this, right? And I was kind of pushed in the direction of a lot of things that were sports related. I played baseball for a while, but generally speaking, like I didn't take to those things, and I always had like serious body image issues, but somehow there was like a mental disconnect where I just kind of found myself coping with that by doing the opposite of what I should. Binge eating, things like that. I was extremely overweight as a young child. I was almost 200 pounds in the 8th grade. You can imagine what that looked like at my height. I'm 5'6". So obese child. And I think that honestly, at a certain point when you're that age and you're especially, I don't know what it looks like now for the youth, but 20 years ago at that age, you were getting made fun of a lot for being that overweight. And that negative feedback loop really just kind of has a snowball effect, and you really just get worse. At least that's what I did. It never did someone make me feel terrible about myself, and did that lead to like me going, man, I gotta get this together. It was more of like, man, this is my life. And maybe that's your experience too. I'm not sure, but somewhere along the line, I was pushed in a direction where I was kind of forced to diet, and I don't want to get into that too much, but something happened in my life where I was kind of forced into just slimming down a bit for my own health, and it was for good intentions, but it was done pretty forcefully. And once I saw that effect taking place, where I was slimming down, I started getting a lot of different attention at school, things like that. A girl that I had a crush on suddenly wanted to talk to me, and that had a spiral that was just as quick, where I became extremely underweight and developed the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of eating disorders, where I became anorexic and bulimic, kind of alternating between the two. And I went all the way down to 110 pounds, same height, well, a little bit taller at this point. I'm in high school. And I looked like just terrible. I looked so bad, just an absolute gaunty mess. And so I think in doing that, in retrospect, looking back as an adult, it was really just like an idea of control, like this concept of control. That I kind of started to fall in love with, where it was like, okay, this is my body, my choice, kind of thing, and I can do whatever I want, and these are the effects that I have, and this is great. And it was really just it was a terrible time, because it altered a lot of things in my body that were kind of irreversible. I developed a thyroid issue. Hormonal imbalances, things like that, because when you starve your body, especially of a lot of the nutrition that it needs, like healthy fats and things like that, in your adolescent years, you end up stifling your body's ability to send hormonal signals that really just help it mature in a way that it's supposed to, because we're animals. Like we're meant to thrive and eat considerably large amounts when we're growing into our adult forms, and I didn't do that. Which could be a reason why I'm still the same height. I don't know. But, and there's a lot of other darker things, like heart issues and stuff that I kind of dealt with. I don't want to get too dark with this video, but it gets really bad. And the reason I say all of that is, it'll make sense a lot, but these are things you have to really be careful of when you're dealing with your body. When it comes to any type of nutrition changes, any type of controlled dieting, you really have to understand what you're doing and not just go from 0 to 100 in either direction, because it's terrible either way. So anyway, to keep going, and I do apologize if the experience portion of this video bores you, but I really think it's important for you guys to understand where I come from going forward when I start to give advice. But later into my adulthood, it wasn't until I was, in my early 20s where I started kind of thinking that I should get into weight training at all. And at this point, I was still very underweight. And the honest to God motivating factor for me was that I still had this leftover kind of gyno from when I was really overweight. No matter how much weight I lost, what ends up happening when you become morbidly obese, like I was as a young child, is that the fat cells in your body become so large that some of them just never shrink back to normal size. Not only that, but you get left with some extra skin and things. So I was very thin, but I had this kind of saggy skin on my chest and lower abdomen, and I still do to some extent. That'll never completely go away. But that was another reason why I kept kind of starving myself and going like, this has to happen eventually, these have to go away, and it never did and never would, which I've come to terms with a long time ago, and it's fine. But so the motivating factor to get back to the weight training portion was to try to compensate for some of that loose skin and maybe fill out my chest areas to where it looked more like muscle and less like leftover fat. So it started with just tons of push-ups, like ridiculous amounts of push-ups. Slowly I started talking to other people in the bodybuilding community, just casual friends, coworkers, things like that. They suggested to me to try to get some free weights. So I ended up with some free weights, bought some cheap ones at like Walmart, and also just a pull-up bar that I hung on my door. So for almost a year, and at this time in my life, I'm renting a room from some people that I met on Craigslist, just a random house. And I would spend about an hour every day. I'd come home and I would do these ritualistic sets of push-ups. I also just kind of incorporated other bodyweight exercises. Over the course of the next few weeks, I started incorporating things like planks, sit-ups, pull-ups with the pull-up bar, different curls and things. And I've always been a pretty intelligent guy. So as soon as I decide I want to do something, I do the proper research and I figure out what I need to do to get there. So calisthenics research became my top priority. I slowly over the next year incorporated tons of different exercises and kind of just set in stone for me this like really hard ritual that I would come home and I would work a certain muscle group, and I got really good at just training with my own body weight. I spent a little over a year doing just that, and I ended up with a physique that was actually really admirable. It was kind of like almost like a martial artist physique. You don't get big doing bodyweight exercises, but you can get quite a good amount of toning done, which is why I recommend to a lot of people to almost just start there. For me, getting into the gym right off the bat was like a no-go. I had a lot of just negative feelings about myself. I was very self-conscious, and the last thing I wanted was to be looking or thinking about someone looking at me over my shoulder as I'm trying to figure out just how to lift the weights properly. So I definitely recommend that to anybody. I still would 100%. Now from there, I ended up just getting a gym membership. Slowly over time, going with some friends of mine, I kind of just learned how to lift through online research and through talking to other people. And over the course of the next, I'd say 2 years, I made tons of friends. They were actually professional personal trainers, things like that. They gave me some real good insight and information that I kind of just incorporated into what I was doing already. And I think one of the reasons that I made friends so easily is because my body fat was so low, even though in my head, this body dysmorphic body image issue that I had every time I looked in the mirror, in my head, all I saw was this loose skin. But what everyone else saw, in the gym, as soon as I started going, was like, wow, dude, like, because I had a lot of tonnage, like I said, from this calisthenics training, and I had like very little body fat, just very little. So the first thing everyone said to me was like, whoa, man, like, what's your body fat percentage? And I'm looking at them like, hey, man, I have no idea. Which was something that really never crossed my mind. I was always just focused on a number on the scale when I was dealing with my eating disorders. But everyone kind of just immediately wanted to know, like, what's your diet? Like, things like that. And I could never really give advice because in the back of my head, I knew that I was just like, well, anorexic. Um, but it really helped to make some friends, at least for me. And obviously that's not going to work for everybody, hopefully. But that was my experience. So I made a ton of friends, and then from there, I just it just became part of my persona. Was this weightlifting thing, because I made it a ritual, and that's one thing that I do think that is very important. Is we all have these patterns in life, these things that we gravitate towards. And my channel here specifically, I want to focus on kind of the introverted, nerdy community. A lot of us are gamers, anime fans, what have you. And we all have these rituals already of like, we binge watch anime, or we grind out our RPG video games. At least I do. Maybe you don't. I don't know. That's kind of what we do here. I love to collect things. And those are all these ritual patterns that I have that I'm very obsessive about. And maybe you are too. It takes a lot of brain power to like max level your characters in an RPG, for example. You don't really take into consideration how much dedication you're putting into that. That's a lot of effort. It might not be like super productive for your life goals, but it's a lot of effort. And if you can learn to dial that into something that you want to do, like for me, it was getting into shape. It was this training thing. I really just recommend learning to hone that ability. And the way that I did that was just forcing myself to do it, no matter how I felt. Even nowadays, and this is sort of, now I guess I'll transition into things that are great, that I've learned, experiences I'd like to share, is that even nowadays people ask me, how do you stay motivated? Because I go 6 days a week, and then even on my off days, on my one off day a week, I end up doing something that helps with my training. And people ask me all the time, like, what is it that keeps you so motivated? Like, why do you want to do this every day? Like yesterday, for example, I had a tattoo appointment that it was all day. That's why I have this. And I don't know how well you can see it, but it's kind of full of blood and plasma right now, so I apologize for that. But putting a shirt on is actually extremely uncomfortable because this is very raw. But I had this tattoo appointment, and I knew it was going to last all day. And I also had class in the morning. So I needed to get my training in, and there was no time in my normal schedule. I normally work until about midnight, so my sleeping schedule, usually I wake up around 8 o'clock. But I needed to fit that slot in because I needed to get some training in before I took a few days off to let this heal. I knew that. So there was no question in my mind about whether or not I wanted to do it. It was just a question of how I could do it. What I ended up doing was waking up at 4 in the morning and just doing it. There was no question. And at first it felt awful. Waking up at 4 with my sleep schedule. I used to wake up at 4 all the time back when I worked construction. Nowadays it's not so easy. But when I first woke up, I felt awful. And the last thing I wanted to do was go to the gym. But those thoughts are like just completely temporary. And I know that. So what did I do? I ate my breakfast, I drank my pre-workout, and I walked over there and I got it done. And as soon as I was about halfway done, I felt amazing. And as soon as I was completely done, I felt accomplished. And then I went on with my day. I got tattooed until almost 3 in the morning. During that tattoo process, this is completely separate, but it was such a long tattoo. This was the most painful tattoo I ever had. My lips turned white, and I almost passed out. And I had to eat a bunch of gummy bears and top ramen just to get my mind right so that I could sit back down and finish it, because I think my stubbornness and tenacity has translated into a lot of different affairs that I have in life where I was like, no man, we came to get this done, we're getting it done. Which my artist loved because, he doesn't want to come back the next day either. And so it all worked out. I didn't pass out and I got it done and it looks incredible. But side rant over, that is the key, in my opinion, to making anything, and not just bodybuilding, but anything in life, that you want to work towards, work for you, is to just do it no matter how you feel. And as soon as it becomes a ritual, as soon as it becomes something that you work into your day as this just happens, I don't want to go to bed every day. Some nights I don't want to sleep, but I know that I have to lay in my bed eventually. Every night I go to bed. Every day I wake up, right? Every day I drink water at some point. There's certain things that you just do, and you don't question how you feel about it sometimes. And that's what I've learned to do with training. that might sound really, really like dark or like not fun. Um, but at the same time, like that feeling, again, to get back to that initial feeling that you'll have where it's like, I don't want to go to the gym, and all those negative thoughts about like, what do people think of me, things like that, they're natural. And no matter how progressed you get, I mean, I'm a pretty in shape guy, right? You might imagine that like someone like me, sorry to be weird and flex for you, but you might imagine that someone like me wakes up and goes, let's do this, let's go lift these weights, and that's not true. Like it's not. I'm just like you. We're just like everybody else in the sense where like we don't wake up wanting to do it. Like our brain tells us to sit on that couch and to binge watch Netflix just like everyone else. The only difference is we've learned to not listen to that voice in our head. So that's something that I really just recommend keeping in the back of your head, and just to help you with those feelings. If you don't feel motivated, that's great, because you're not supposed to. Motivation is something that comes after progress. It's like that snowball effect. As soon as you see something working in your favor, as soon as you feel like you're adding value to something, you're going to enjoy it a lot more. As soon as you feel like you're getting value out of something, you're going to enjoy it no matter what, and you're going to do it without question. So just don't question yourself and get in there. So yeah, and to get back to the body image thing, to transition back to that, the main reason I really wanted to get into this is because I don't want anyone to get into training and immediately set in their mind a goal that they need to have in terms of aesthetics and beat themselves up for not getting there fast enough. The number one thing that I see trending in the media is this like idea of like, we cut, we bulk, and you see all these images of people that are in their competition phase or leading up to their competition phase. And we think like, why can't I be like that? And it's just like the same way I felt dealing with my eating disorder. Even like after I lost all the weight, like with the extra skin, like why can't I be like that? Like what is different about me? And the reality is, guys, is that you shouldn't. We shouldn't. Nobody should compare themselves to that, because it's not an unrealistic image in the sense where it's unattainable. It's just, it's not what these people are doing year round. Nobody should ever do that year round. And the science behind that is very scary when you look into it, the people that do attempt to do that year round. I don't want to scare anyone into like the concept of bodybuilding or gaining this aesthetic figure, but when you start to dip below what your natural level of body fat is, you will experience some serious mental health issues. Like they're unavoidable because your hormones are being manipulated as you do this. As a male, especially, I really only do research on males, so I apologize to any females in the audience. But I mean, a lot of the same principles will apply to both genders. This is just, obviously I'm more familiar with something that I have to deal with personally. But as a male, when you start to dip below that range, and for me, I know that range, like anytime I get below 12% body fat is when I start to feel some of these symptoms. When I start to get below 8, that's when I'm in danger zone. But you'll start to be very lethargic. You'll start to be very angry. It doesn't matter how shredded you look, like you're not gonna feel good. Nobody will feel good at that point. And to some of these competitive bodybuilders that have a genetic predisposition to kind of be able to deal with that a little better, they're sometimes able to get all the way down to like 4%. But most of those people, even the ones that are mentally capable of doing that, will absolutely only do that for a couple weeks out of the year. And that's just right leading up to their competition phase. And as soon as they're out of that competition phase, they bulk right back up because they know how dangerous that is for their body. You can't continue to grow and gain strength at that body fat range, and you also can't continue to have any kind of healthy lifestyle. Like your relationships, personal relationships, will suffer dramatically. I know from my own experience, you can imagine as someone that's dealt with an eating disorder how badly I would have suffered from some of these symptoms before I really realized what I was doing. And in my romantic relationships, I was very angry, and I was just a very upset person all of the time, and I didn't really understand why but it was because I was training to this level and trying to maintain this image year round, and it was so bad for me. So to transition again into the statements as far as like what I've learned and what I would like to share, it's that we all need to learn what our body fat range should be, right? And that's something you kind of have to feel out. Like, your doctor can't tell you. The whole like BMI structure of like what is healthy for you, what your doctor might tell you, it's not specific to your body type. There's so many different body types that I really just feel like that entire system is broken. So you have to kind of learn this for yourself. But, you know, I think the safest way to do that is to not go overboard in either direction. As soon as you start to feel these symptoms coming on, saying like, okay, maybe do this a little different, would be my best advice. You know, and if you have like a beach party that you want to go to, and you want to get like super duper shredded, plan that way ahead of time, and slowly take on that caloric deficit that's going to lead you in that direction. And when I say caloric deficit, I mean consuming less calories than you think you're exerting in your day-to-day life. But do that slowly over the course of like a month or 2 months, or even 3 to 6 months. You know, plan ahead, and just little by little is the best way to do that. Because when you start to starve yourself dramatically and really just want that all at once, your mental health is going to suffer. It does not matter how good you look. I promise you, you will feel bad. Like, and you will feel just not great. And to anyone that's questioning that and saying like, you know, I don't care, I just want to look good. Maybe something that'll kind of give you some insight and motivation as to why that's silly would be to say that, like, if you're doing this to attract, you know, attract your potential partner, for example, they're not going to be attracted to that. Like, you know, humans on a psychological level can kind of read other people in terms of like what they're dealing with mentally. And trust me, if your hormones are way out of balance and you're just in a constant mental rut, other people are going to see that, and that's going to be a lot more noticeable than the extra little bit of shred in your muscles. I promise you. So I don't recommend going that route. You know, it's just a bad move all the way around. So yeah, guys, I think that the reason I feel like I have to go on this long rant and tell you my experience is just because I would like to kind of give advice and slowly over time give little tips here and there on how you guys can develop whatever aesthetic, whatever goals you have, even if it's just strength. Maybe you don't care about how you look, you just want to get stronger. You know, I can definitely help you. I've done the research. But what I don't want to do is promote this image that people feel like they have to hurt themselves to attain, because that is the opposite of what I think is good for anyone. You know, it's just that is the negative side of what the fitness industry has become. You know, it's just a very bad and scary world. Some other things I'd like to mention, I guess, would be just to talk to your doctor. Talk to your doctor about like where your hormones are at. If you have a question of like why you might take on more body fat, more anything, it could just be like some kind of hormonal balance you have naturally. And I would also say that regardless of what those results might be, like not to take that on as a negative thing, because we all just have different body types. Like I'm genetically predisposed to having more body fat than a lot of people, and that's okay. I'm also genetically predisposed to having a very big head and being very short, and that's also okay. You know, like I want this to be about like positive reinforcement in terms of how we look at ourselves and building confidence, and not just about aesthetics. That is my number one thing here. So I guess to kind of wrap it up, guys, and to circle back into some of the things we've gone over. You know, I've shared with you my experiences, some of my pitfalls, some things that I've learned, some general tips, and things that might help clear the air about like the idea of getting motivated and getting started, as well as shared a little bit of insight on some negative things that are very scary and very real that you could potentially do to yourself if you go about, you know, trying to train and gain this new body image that you desire in a self-destructive way. And now I guess I would like to share to you some of my goals that I have personally. And it kind of ties into some other things that I think are good to hear, which is like, I don't know personally if I ever want to compete. A lot of people ask me, you know, at the gym when I got my pump on and I look like, you know, this bodybuilder, I guess. Like, when are you going to compete? Like, what do you look great, man. Like, what are you doing? And I don't think personally that I ever will. To get back to like my family and background that we're all athletes. Like my dad was a competitive lifter, and my brother was at one point as well. And I know that when you get into that world, I don't want to speak on anything that they did, because I honestly don't know the entirety of what they did. I know a little bit about what my dad did, but you know, they've both been very subtle about a lot of these things. But when you get into that world, there's a lot of other things that come into play that other people are doing, just like any other sport. And when I guess there's no way to beat around the bush here. I'm talking about performance-enhancing drugs, steroids, things like that other people are going to be using, and I know that. I've gone into that world a little bit myself. I've talked to some people, and when you're around other people that are all doing that, and you're forced to compete at that level, you find yourself, you know, regardless of how you might feel about it personally, looking towards some of these things as something that you might find necessary at some point just to get to where you want to be. And as someone that has dealt with all these different body image issues, you know, as someone that still suffers from body dysmorphic disorder, I know that I would go that route eventually, and I don't want to do that. Because again, like for me, as much as I'm as self-aware as I am about my own body image issues, as much as I know personally that my motivation to get started on this journey came from a very negative and dark place, I also know that my goals are very positive. I want to maintain a healthy lifestyle. I want to maintain a healthy state of mind going forward, and that's what I want to promote. And I would never want to do anything that would sacrifice that. So that's something I don't think I'll ever do. What I do want to do at some point is kind of develop like a holistic wellness program of some kind. And this is just kind of my beta test for that on a content creator level, where I'm able to help people deal with some issues that they might have personally, you know, on a therapeutic level, and also incorporate some things like strength training to kind of alleviate some of those mental issues, as well as double down and make them feel more confident about how they feel physically. Because I think those two things really line up in ways that we don't take into consideration a lot of times. A lot of times we separate mental and physical health like they're two separate entities, and we don't really take into consideration how much they affect each other. So those are my goals. So yeah, guys, I really hope some of that, you know, kind of cleared the air for how you feel about what I do personally, and maybe help motivate you to get started. Always feel free to reach out to me about any questions you might have, even if it's just like about what I do personally. But more than that, I would like you guys to reach out to me if you have any questions about how you might get started, some things that you could try. You know, I have no plug for like a nutrition plan. I'm not sponsored by any supplement companies. This is something I'm purely doing on an altruistic level to help other people deal with some of the things that I've dealt with personally. So yeah, guys, that's just me kind of spilling my guts to you and telling you about my journey and hopefully inspiring you to start yours. Because I really do think that outside of just creating a positive body image issue, or a positive body image feeling that we have about ourselves, wow, that's difficult to articulate. But I think that what that ultimately boils down to in terms of how it affects our lives is an ability to have discipline in all of our affairs and really just work towards goals that matter, that don't pertain at all to how we look in the slightest. You know, one thing that's really great about strength training is that when you start to realize how your goals are attainable and that your self-doubt is not a fact, it's a negative thought. And when you learn to challenge that and really just prove to yourself that you're more than you think you are, you're able to apply that in other realms of your life. You know, whether that's school, a career, it's such a positive thing that you can learn. It's such a grand wealth of knowledge to have, that you're better than you think you are, because everybody is. That is my personal belief. So yeah, guys, if you enjoyed this content, if you'd like to hear more, if you'd like to keep in contact with me, whatever it might be, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Drop a like, or more importantly, drop a comment and tell me about how you feel about all this. Whether you've ever dealt with these issues, or if you'd like to get started on working towards some of these things we've talked about here. All right, guys, Shredded Otaku. Thanks for hearing me.